ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandment and has commanded us to be engaged with the words of Torah. O Lord our God, we ask that you make the words of your Torah sweet in our mouths and in the mouth of your entire people of the greater house of Israel. May we, our descendant and the descendant of your people of the greater house of Israel, know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, O Lord, who teaches Torah to his people. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave to us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the Torah. So we're on Parasha Beshalach. Can you say Beshalach? From the verb to send. And Parasha Beshalach takes us through the epic miracle of the crossing of the Red Sea on dry land. In Hebrew, the Red Sea is not called Yam HaAdom, which is Red Sea. It's called Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds. Reeds, I don't know. Okay. I don't think that I've ever seen a movie about the Exodus that really depicts anything near 2 to 3 million people crossing the Red Sea. Lower estimates say 2 million, I go for 3. Just because the first census at Mount Horeb counted 600,000 or 650,000 men from 20 to 50. Count the wives, count the people under 20 and above 50, and count the children. It's like, wow, we can near 2 to 3 million. And I don't know if we can fathom what it looked like. And the Levites also were not counted in that census, because the census was military and Levites were not included. So, on top of it, they had with them large flocks of sheep, goat, donkeys, camels, horses, ducks, chicken, geese, whatever they had with them to cross. So, and the Red Sea crossing is generally described as a single overnight event, with the Tanakh noting that Hashem drove the sea back with a wind all that night, and the people crossed by morning. An estimate for the crossing of roughly, people have done estimates with that, 2 million people would last from 3 to 12 hours. Depending on the width of the path and speed of the large and unencumbered troops. I mean, people like, how many people go at once like this? It's like, whoa. Some alternate estimates, calculations are, many people do that. Okay, so, but all we know is that they crossed in a day. They crossed in a day. All night the wind blew and they crossed in a day. So, and here let's talk a bit about the route that they took. See, there's a white line here. Okay, where's come on here? The white line here. Here. So they came from here. Here is the delta, the Nile Delta. That's where Goshen was. Their first encampment, we read, is in a place called Sukkot. And many people, they think that went like this to Mount Sinai. This is not Mount Sinai. It's called Mount Sinai, but it's not. If you read the text, you can follow the road that they took. That's where they crossed. And Mount Sinai, Paul says, is the tallest mountain in Midian. And Jethro was a priest in of Midian. So Midian is here, not here. So they crossed right here. And I know that beach here, I've been there. A big, long beach. This is the only place that could have 3 million, all these people all night. The whole place here is all mountain and rock. But here there's a big beach, so that's traditionally said that that's where they were. So, and this beach is called the Nueva Beach. Like I said, the only place along that shoreline that could have a place where these people could sit down. The rest of the shore is mountain. Deep sea divers have found Egyptian 6-spokes chariot wheels covered with corals at the bottom of the sea by that area. Corals, they're not like flowers get grown. The corals, they have something to grow on. Actually, some people right now, in order to reinvigorate the corals in the midst of the sea that have died, they put junk in there. Because coral will grow on something. It has to grow on something. So, and in a certain way, as it does, it preserves things. And in that area, the sea, you can see things like this. 6-spokes wheel were Egyptians. In that time, you can see things like this. So it's interesting. There is, I think, in the library a video, a DVD that gives the whole way using Bible verses. And if you can't find it, I can send you a link. It's a YouTube video. It's very nicely done. So now, but we're going to the Brit Hadashah. The Brit Hadashah segment for today that we find on the Torah Club little flyers is Matthew 14, 22 to 33, the place where Yeshua walked on water. So, like I say, I'm gonna show you how it's done. I have here a bucket of water, and at the end of the Midrash, I will show you how to walk on water. It's simple, really. With Yeshua, I can do anything. So here's the map of where it happened. It doesn't have to be water from the Sea of Galilee. Any water, you can do it with any water. So. Yeah. Not now. At the end. So here's what we read. Yeshua and the disciples were by the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Yeshua just finished feeding the great multitude in a deserted, remote place near Bethsaida. Do we have Bethsaida up there? Maybe not. Yes, it's right here. So he was somewhere here, maybe. And I didn't want to read it because it's part of another parasha. And that's where we had the miracles of the loaves and fishes. Would you like to be able to do that? We bring one piece of bread and one fish, and we pray over it at the beginning of Oneg, and bingo, we have for everybody, That would make things simpler. I still haven't mastered how to do that yet. Now that I've got the walking on water figured out, next time I'll do multiplication of loaves and fishes. One thing at a time. So, but for now, after they had fed the multitude, 5,000, it says, Yeshua and the disciple needed to go to the other side of the lake, to a place called Gennesaret, which is here, this place. So they were here, and they need to go there. If you're on a boat, you go walk on water. It's easy, So maybe, I don't know, they were here by the sea, and maybe with all the food that they gave, maybe they felt mobbed by the people. Say, well, we want more, So where are we going to go? It's like the Egyptians coming in. They're going to go, let's go the way of the sea. But they had a boat. So here's what we read in Matthew 14:22-23. Immediately after he had the Talmidim get in the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he sent the crowds away. So he told the disciples, go to Gennesaret. And he sent the crowd, and there was only one boat. What's he going to do? After he had sent the crowds away, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. So there was hills around, so he went to pray. It's amazing how many times we hear that Yeshua went to pray. He did that a lot. It's a good example. The question is, who did he pray to? Did he pray to himself? He prayed to the Father. Okay, so Yeshua tells the disciples to take the only transportation there is while he goes and pray. Well, if I have no transport, I'd pray too. So let's see what happens next. By this time, the boat was several miles from shore, battling a rough sea and a head wind. So, night came on and he was alone. Now, he went to pray, nightfall, and there was a big, the Lake of Galilee, it's not a sea, it's really a lake. It's big enough to have storms. So there was a big storm there. At 4 a.m., Yeshua arrives walking on the water. It says here, it says at 4 o'clock. He came towards them. Yeshua comforts the scared. He's the one on the water. They're the one in a boat, but they're the one who needs comfort. It's like, it should have been the opposite. Oh, Yeshua, what's going on? No, they're the one in a boat, safely in a boat, but they're the one, So they were, and when the Talmidim saw him coming on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they say, and screamed with fear. Yeshua remembered that when he appeared to them on the day of unleavened bread when he resurrected. He appeared with them in the house, and they were scared. They said, see that I'm not a ghost. They always thought he was a ghost or something. So he said, it's a ghost. And they said, and screamed with fear. What it shows is that they believed in ghosts. They believed in ghosts. Do you believe in ghosts? It's like... But at once Yeshua spoke to them. Courage, he said. It is I. Stop being afraid. Oh, okay. That very scene where the disciples that think that Yeshua is a ghost, again, that was the same at the resurrection, harbors the same suspicion that the disciples had when they saw the resurrected Master. And the text goes, they were still talking about it when there he was, standing among them, startled and terrified. They thought that they were seeing a ghost, but he said to them, this one is from Luke, okay? I took a different one because each of the places of the books has a bit more details. This one's from Luke. They were still talking about it. There he was, standing among them, startled and terrified. They thought they were seeing a ghost, but he said to them, why are you so upset? Yeah, we're seeing you coming on the water. We don't know where that is, Expect us not to be. Why are you so upset? Why are these doubts welling up inside you? Why are these doubts welling up inside you? Say, you're asking us a lot, Yeshua. He says, look at my hands, my feet. It is I myself, touch and see. A ghost have no flesh and bones as you see me have. So this was about the day of the resurrection. The significance of Yeshua striding on the back of the sea can be understood in several ways. He was not merely showing off. It comes actually from verses in the Tanakh. verses that Judaism understood as a messianic nature. He says, "He alone spreads out the sky and walks on the waves of the sea." That's from Job. That's what the miracles, there were some miracles that Yeshua did, there were sign miracles. There were supposed to be miracles that the Messiah would do. Walk on water, heal the lepers, give sight to the blind, stuff like multiply food. These were all sign miracles that were messianic. So I think changing the water into wine was one too. So it says, and then another one in Isaiah 43:16. Here is what Adonai says: "Who made the way in the sea, a path through the raging waves?" Who made the way through the sea? How the way through the sea, a path through the raging waves. I'll be able to walk on the sea, but I don't know if I can have a storm going there. I don't know. And then in Psalm 77:19, it says, "Your way went through the sea." It's talking to God, right? "Your path through the turbulent waters, but your footsteps could not be traced." That's Psalm 77:19. So here we have messianic verses that says, he walks on the waves of the sea, not just calm sea, on the waves, through the raging waves, the turbulent waters, but his steps could not be traced. Well, his footprint on the water may not be known, because a foot on the water leaves no print. So those were verses from the Tanakh about the walking on the water. So he was not just showing off. He was doing signs. Just like we talked about what we did in the temple with the money changers. There is a verse that says the Messiah will cleanse the house of Levi. He was supposed to expose the house of Levi. So that was Messianic. It was not just like showing off or something. So let's talk a little bit about the idea of waters in Jewish studies. This book, the New Testament, Brit Hadashah, is written on the foundation of the Tanakh. What does the Tanakh understand? What we understand about water, about turbulent water in a midrashic way in the Tanakh, okay? In the ancient world, waters of the sea symbolized the forces of chaos. Sea doesn't keep boundary, it just measures everything and it moves. It doesn't stay in its place. It's very, it's like, whoa, it doesn't stay in one place. It mixes up, So the sea represented chaos. We see the beast growing out of the sea. It was called the abyss also. Here, and here's a, give me a short, somebody gives me a short definition of chaos. 2-3 words, chaos. How would you define what is chaos? Disorder. Okay, disorder. Chaos, disorder, no boundaries, mess, balagat, confusion, no form. Here is a from the Bible here. The earth was unformed and void. That's Genesis 1:2. Darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the water. So, I don't know if anybody's went to school and studied evolution. Of course, evolution puts things back millions of years. You know how they say, millions of years, it's got to put a million. That I don't know. But what evolution teaches is that everything started from the primordial waters. There is a term, it's called the soup, primordial soup. I mean, today when they go to Mars or something, or the moon or somewhere, when they study other planets to see if there is life, what are they looking for? Water. Because life comes from water. I mean, at least as we know it. There might be other forms that come from something else, but in our world, that's where it comes from. Maybe in the solar system, whatever. So, and lo and behold, whereas they may get their dates wrong, that's how Genesis describes the beginning. The earth was unformed and void, everything was messed together, and the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the water. Some Bibles say abyss, some Bibles says the deep, but basically is a messy mess of water. And when he starts creating things, what does he do? He doesn't bring, here, some stuff here. No, it all comes from inside the water. He takes, the Hebrew word for chaos is tohu uvohu. It's here, tohu uvohu, which is unformed and void. Tohu uvohu. This expression, tohu uvohu, is found only twice in the Bible. There and somewhere in Jeremiah. So that means messy, unformed. But everything that was created came from that water. It's a little bit, I like to give the example of when our son used to live with us, his bedroom. The homework with the connects, with the Legos and the dirty laundry with clean laundry, everything together. So we said, go clean your room. Oh, it's dark. So, well, first turn on the light. Turn on the light. You turn on the light and then you start putting the connects with the connects, the Legos with the Legos, the homework that is done, what's not done on a pile on your desk, the dirty laundry in the hamper, the clean laundry you hang, it's like, it's what God did. It was all a mess, everything's a mess. Okay, let's turn on the light, let there be light. And then put this with that, the dry land, the sea, the plants according to their orders, and the animals on the fifth day, the fish and the birds. So I need to create on the same day. And on the 6 days, everything that lives on the surface of the earth, animals and man. So it was a mess. But it says here, the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the water. Big mess. Big chaos. But it was not random. The Spirit of God moved. Hashem's Spirit moved above the chaos. Who feels that their life may be chaotic? Another word for a chaotic life, I would use the word random. No rhyme, no reason, no order. Why did I get sick? Now when I need to do something, that doesn't work. Why did this and that happen to such person? Why did this and that happen? That doesn't make sense. Random chaos. Right? Can anyone relate? I can. We never know what's going to happen to the next second. Chaos, random. But you know what? What's really nice? The Spirit of God hovers over the chaos. He's there. This is why I write the verse about the prayers to take comfort in knowing that, as the Master said, not one hair of our head falls without the Master. And even the sparrow dying, he knows. The fact that he knows is important. I mean, sometimes we can feel like chaos is the normal in life, right? Chaos is the normal in life. But, and it is. It is. But we must remember, His ways are not our ways. And what may seem to us like chaos maybe his organized plan for our lives. His organization is not our organization. He's like, one time I heard a little analogy to that. It was people on a boat, on a small boat, and there was a storm. And the boat was going full speed. And there was fog and clouds and wind. And the boat was going full speed. And that place was known to have rocks in there, but full speed. And somebody was there says, my gosh, this boat should be going slower. We can't see like that much ahead. Where's the captain? What's he doing? Why is this boat running full speed in this fog? This isn't not right, not normal. And somebody came to that person and says, oh, don't worry. The captain, he's sitting at the top of the mast up there where the controls are. And you know what? He's above the fog. He can see. Our captain is above the fog. He can see. So nothing happens by accident. Not even the death of a sparrow, not even one hair of our head falls without him knowing. And what seems to us like chaos may be his organized plan for our lives. Our curriculum for growth. One time I was talking with somebody. It was a lady, and she was complaining about her daughter who has left home. And she felt she was with street kids, and I know how bad that is. And she didn't know who she was, and I said, what's that? Her daughter was maybe had joined the street kids, or she was in the street. Yeah. So and it is concerning. It is concerning. So without being cavalier, I told her, okay, now, you seem to be a woman of faith. I had seen in her house some stuff, So yeah. I say, do you pray? Yeah, I pray. Do you believe that when you pray, God hears your prayers? Mm-hmm, he hears my prayers, yeah. Do you believe that he answers your prayers? Yeah, because he said, whatever I ask in his name, I said, absolutely. So if you prayed, why don't you believe that he answered your prayers? And it's the thing. We got to believe that he has things in his hand. He has a whole world in his hand, even us. And somehow he has a plan, and he knows that plan, and we got to trust him for it. Sometime, I told her like that. I says, what were you doing when you were 16? She said, I was like, but you grew from it. You learned. That was your curriculum. And God is in charge of the curriculum of your daughter. The things that she will have to go through in order to learn to grow and mature. And you got to hold her hand in prayer. You got to be concerned mother. You got to do all that. But somehow, if you're a woman of faith, you got to also come to a certain level of trust when things, especially, and trust happens when, faith happens when things don't go the way we think they should go. It's easy to have faith when things go our way. Like they say, it's easy to have faith in the light. It's harder to have faith in the dark. But our faith should be in the dark as it is in the light, because God is light, and he's the one who knows. And I know these are hard words. I don't always, this is idealistic. Do we come up to that? No. But, to put the goals high, it's like, let's reach for the stars in our faith. We may only reach the ceiling, but at least we go somewhere. And he knows us. He knows our frame, that we're but dust. So anyway, so here. The Messiah, just like the Spirit of God here, hovered over the surface of the water. The Messiah also strode over the waves. His Spirit still hovers above our seemingly chaotic lives, just as he did over the chaotic primordial waters and also on the waters of the Lake of Galilee. Here is in the beginning, the earth was unformed and void. Darkness was on the face of the deep. The Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the water. At the time of the flood, also, when the earth was covered with a watery abyss, in Genesis 6 through 9, he says, Genesis 8:8, he sent out a dove to see if the water had gone from the surface of the ground. Another place where a dove often is representative of the Spirit of God, checking things out, giving the message to Noah when it is safe. Another illustration. At the time of Yeshua's immersion on the Jordan River, in the Jordan River, then Yochanan gave this testimony. I saw the Spirit coming down from heaven like a dove and remaining on him. Again, over the waters of Yeshua's immersion. The Spirit of God over the waters, creating, moving, protecting, informing, connecting. It's a very important theme. Here we go, the 4 pictures with it. The miracle of Yeshua walking on the water falls into the category of those of the miracles also performed by Moshe. Moshe demonstrated power over the water when he split the Red Sea and led Israel through the midst of the waters. Hasidic, like religious, mystical, Jewish midrashers, teach that the Spirit of Messiah, we're talking about Jews, okay? That Jews are Messianic in a certain way. They haven't recognized Yeshua as the Messiah, but they believe in the Messiah. We believe that they believe that he will come. So it teaches that the Spirit of Messiah is more exalted than that of Moshe. The Spirit of Messiah is higher than Moshe's spirit because the Torah depicts Moses drawn out from the water, dividing the sea, and walking through the water. But the Hasids, they depict the Spirit of Messiah hovering above the water, just as at creation, after Noah's flood, and at the time of his immersion. Of course, the Hasids don't talk about the time of his immersion, but they always understood that the Spirit of God hovering over the waters is the Spirit of Messiah. Actually, in a Hasidic teaching, when he said, let there be light, that's when Messiah was, So there is a lot, of course, the traditional Jews do not know there's all that. It's mystical Judaism that teaches this thing. They saw the Spirit of Messiah in the Spirit of God hovering over the waters. Does that make sense, all that? Okay, here. The miracle of Yeshua also walking on the water also recalls the miracle of Joshua, Elijah, and Elisha, who split the Jordan, crossed through the mist. Joshua, he split the Jordan, crossed through the midst of it. Can you imagine Joshua? Here he's been discipled by Moses all this time. And now he's the one chosen. First of all, him and Caleb are the only one who remained from the first generation. Everybody else was second generation. Caleb and Joshua, they saw what happened in Egypt. They saw the crossing of the Red Sea. For everybody else in the camp, it was just stories they heard about. Now, Joshua is supposed to walk in Moshe's shoes, being the leader. People don't believe too much in leadership. They want to see it. It's not because he's been anointed and prayed for. Okay, now you in Moses' shoes. Show us something like Moses then. With Elijah, he wanted to do the same thing Elisha did. He was a disciple. Same thing, Joshua is going to have to prove himself. So, okay. What did he do? He split the Jordan River for people to cross on dry land with the ark. And then it says, then they believed in him. It's not like doubting. Everybody can claim to be something, but God needs to promote them, validate. And also there was an axe head that Elisha brought up from the river. And Kepha, Peter, when he said he saw Yeshua walk on the water, he knew all these stories. Those were things that people talked about. He knew that this story. He was a man who, as impetuous as he may seem to be, he actually left his job and his reputation in order to follow that perfect stranger. This is walking on the water. This is walking on the water. It's not like you're going to have unemployment. It's not going to have, it's like, this is walking on the water. What the 12 disciples did is like walking on the water. But Peter, he was ready for more. I think he felt he had more. He had been told, he had made the great confession, I believe you're the Messiah. And then Yeshua told him all kinds of things. But for that, he even predicted how he would die as a martyr. So he needed more. It's like, if I'm told, you got to give all this, well, I better be sure. I cannot be on the word of somebody who says, I believe. Oh, no. So he needed more. He didn't mind giving his life or whatever, but he needed more. That's not wrong. It's not wrong to ask God for more to help us. I think he likes it when we put his feet to the fire. Sometimes I feel like Peter and Paul were two colors of the same type of cloth. Passionate, give it all people. They were willing to put themselves on the line, but they've got to know. And Paul wanted to know. And to me, when I read that he was going to fight the disciples to bring them to jail, I think he was already convicted that they had the truth. Because Gamaliel told him, if it's of man, it's going to peter out by itself. But if it's of God, you can't fight against it. Okay, well, I'm going to go fight against it, because then Gamaliel told him, if it's of God, beware that you don't find yourself fighting against God. To me, as Paul, I think he was already convicted, and I would take that as a challenge. Okay, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to I'm going to have God meet me right there. But then once God met him, that's it. There was no going back. There was no doubting. But he had to make sure. And the guy died as a martyr. The guy, so I think Peter was the same way. He says, in his own way, Peter wanted to test that whole thing that required his life, but also his death. He wanted to test it. So the narrative continues. It says, then Kepha called to Yeshua, saying, Lord, if it's really you, you tell me to come on the water. And Yeshua said, yes, come. No big deal. He said, so Kepha got out of the boat, walked on the water toward Yeshua. He actually did. Now, can you imagine having that on your discipleship resume? He would arrive in Rome and the places, and he says, this is the guy who walked on water with Yeshua. Okay, can you do that again? And it's like, whoa. So he said, yes, I did it, He went by faith, just by the word of the master. He walked on water by faith, just by the word of the master. And see what happens next. It says, when he saw the wind, he looked at the wind. When he saw the wind, he got afraid and began to sink. He yelled, Lord, save me. Yeshua immediately stretched out his hand and told him, and took hold of him and said to him, such little trust, why did you doubt? He actually did walk on water, but as long as he kept his eyes on Yeshua, he could do it. When he started to go, oh no! You know, and this is really life. If we keep our eyes on Yeshua, we can walk on the chaotic, raging waters of our life with faith, trust, seeming dignity, and seeming of strength. But when we start looking, then you start sinking. And so, but this story also illustrates the risks and hazard of life of faith. It does that. The life of faith, if God calls us to do something, it might not always happen. It might not always go well. The life of faith sometimes feels like stepping out on a boat from a boat and walk onto water. The wind and waves of life may dismay the man of faith. If the winds and waves of life dismay the man of faith, he sinks in doubt. But the master rescues him. He understands, he knows we're but dust. But that last part, we may think, Peter walking on water, that's the takeaway from that story. To me, the takeaway is when he sank, Yeshua was there. You know, for me, that's the important takeaway. When we sink, we can call up, sorry. You know, it's going to take us. You know, this story seemed to portend to things in his life. Here's what it says, and I don't have it written here because I added it. When Yeshua came to the territory around Caesarea Philippi, he had sent his disciples two by two to tell about him. Then they all come back, and he asked his disciples, who are the people saying the Son of Man is? Who do they say? What do they say about me? I know they heard about the miracles. Well, what are they talking about? What do they say? He's trying to get some intelligence here. He probably already knows, but... Well, some say you're Yohanan the Immerser. You know, resurrected, of course. Others say that you're Elijah. Others say you're Jeremiah. Elijah because he did some similar miracles. Jeremiah because he prophesied the destruction of the temple. Or one of the prophets. But you, he said to them, who do you say that I am? And Shimon Kepha answers, you are the Mashiach, the Son of the living God. And Yeshua says, you didn't know this because you see me. It's God who showed you that. And that's very important. We cannot bring the knowledge of Yeshua to somebody by logical argument or historical prophecy fulfilled, blah, blah, blah. No. It's the Spirit of God that's got to do that. It's the Spirit of God that got to bring, especially for Jews, that brings that confession, that brings that confession, conviction from our heart. You know, so he said, and later on, he says, on this truth I will build my congregation, and the gates of hell will not be able to prevail against it. And what that means, looking at the original wording of it, says it means that it doesn't mean that here we are the congregation behind locked doors, you know, and the gates of hell attack and never can win. That's the picture that's usually given. But when you look at the original meaning of the word prevail, it's actually the opposite. It's actually the congregation on an all-out attack, and hell cannot even resist, loses, you know. And what we're doing is, right now, is a form of this attack. Learning the word, talking to our friends, trying to live our life as per the Torah, learn to live the commandment. Those are how we do this battle. These are the weapons of our battle. So he told them afterward, he says, but don't tell anybody yet that I'm the Messiah. I'm not ready yet. There's a little bit more time. He told them at the end of this passage in Matthew 16. But at this moment, Kepha stepped out on the waters by saying in front of everybody when he had not said it yet, I believe you're the Messiah. Kepha, he stepped out on, nobody else said it, He was just like, pew, you are the Messiah, aren't you? And then Yeshua tells him, shh, don't tell nobody yet. But later on, whereas at that time he was full of the Spirit and he did that, later on at the time of the crucifixion, he denied even knowing Yeshua 3 times. That's like Peter sinking, looking at the problems that very confession causes. That's Peter sinking. But we see Yeshua taking his hand again when after the resurrection they meet by the Sea of Galilee and Yeshua asks him 3 times, Peter, do you love me? Feed my lamb, feed my sheep. So the 3-time denials were the 3 times reconfess. Yeshua taking his hand up. Yes, you looked at me, you walked on the water for a while, then you sank. Well, yeah, here we go. That whole story seems to jive together. Okay, so we did that. That's about the Sea of Galilee. So let's go back to John 6. It says, when it talks about something else that happened, this time it's not in Matthew, it's in John. They had rowed 3 or 4 miles when they saw Yeshua approaching the boat. So there they went, it was dark and stormy, and see Yeshua approaching the boat, walking on the lake. They were terrified, but he said to them, stop being afraid, it is I. Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and instantly the boat reached the land where they were heading to. Whoa, they'd just gone 3-4 miles, and when they see him, displacement. Wow, they must have had what do you call this machine on Star Trek? Transporter beam. So basically the 3-fold miracles of walking on water, calming the sea, and spatial displacement disconcerted the disciples. It's like he calmed the water. It's like, who has authority over the weather but God? Who has, So he says, so here's what the text in Mark says. We've got to go a little bit everywhere to get the full story. In Mark it says, he got into the boat with them and the wind ceased. They were completely astounded, for they did not understand about the loaves. On the contrary, their heart had been made stone-like. Wow! So you remember in the beginning, that very chapter where we started it, it was about first the feeding of the multitude, and then they got into the walking on the sea. It was in the same chapter, But Mark brings that little point. They were completely astounded when the wind ceased, because they did not understand about the loaves. They saw the miracle and they did not understand it. On the contrary, their hearts had been made stone-like. I don't know what that looked like. I don't know why he says that. Mark was not there, but he got his report from Peter. Mark's reporting comes from Peter. So Peter is the only one who said, I'll walk towards you. So this is Peter's account of the disciple. So it's important here that, Mark was not there. So in his renditions of the event, that Mark got from Peter, Mark implies that if they had correctly understood the miracle of the dividing of the loaves, the ensuing miracles would not have surprised them at all. They had a hard time with the walking on the water because they did not understand the multiplication of the loaves. So what was it about the dividing of the loaves that the disciples should have understood? And again, there is that theme about the hardness of heart against what's going on, which goes totally with Parasha Beshalach, which shows us about the hardness of heart of Pharaoh in front of miracles. And so, in what way was their heart hardened like stone? So, we can think of the Pharaoh of Egypt. Though Moses performed miraculous signs and wonders, Pharaoh continued hardening his heart. That is to say, he refused to change his mind. The disciples, what was it that they needed? The disciples, like Pharaoh, they needed to change their mind about the Master, about the Messiah. They needed to have a paradigm shift about the Messiah. They needed to the astonishing miracles that they saw required them to reassess who the Messiah is. The astonishment now about those miracles forced them to reconsider their previous assumption of the Messiah, the popular assumption that other Galileans had, that the Messiah will be a soldier like Bar Kokhba or something, a revolutionary guy who will conquer Rome and do the politics and become king and all that. This was the idea of the Messiah. Not a guy who would, the nice guy, if the Romans ask you to carry their load for a mile, I give them two, you know. They had a totally wrong idea of who the Messiah was. They thought of a soldier, a revolutionary, a politician, a zealot, if anything. Maybe they thought of the mix of a Pharisee and a zealot together with a little bit of the Sadducees on top for good measure. You know, that's what their idea. They didn't think of somebody like Yeshua. So they see these miracles and say, yes, it's nice, but that's not what we thought. So this whole thing, just like Pharaoh, he had to reassess things. The disciples have to reassess, what's this? What are we seeing here? If this is the Messiah, that's not the type of guy we had in mind. That was a turning point for the disciples. And a turning point not unlike many of us have to do, which is important in our study of the end time right now. What we're talking about in our study of the end time, would the Messiah be too Jewish so that Christians will reject him? Ooh! You know, it's like, will it look different than what they expect? Jews did not recognize him because he was different than what they expected. You know, will the Christian go through the same thing? They'll say, who is this guy telling us to observe Shabbat? Doesn't he know to eat kosher? Haven't he read Galatians? You know, will that happen? You know, Jews needed to reconsider their view of Messiah. Will it be the same with a lot of Christianity? The disciples had to do it. They had to reassess. So, as we engage, all of us, in this Messianic walk of faith, as we learn, as we attempt to walk on these raging waters, because I think most of us, when we start walking on that walk, it causes a little bit of chaos in our lives, right? With our friends, with our churches, with our families. You know, Jews get ostracized if they believe in Messiah, by their families if they believe in Messiah. And we all go through the same thing. It's like walking on water. The unknown, on top of it, the movement is not very rich. We don't have our own buildings, nice like they have, you know. Some of them do, you know. Beit Emmanuel is a very nice place. Some do, but not most. So but look at what we read in the end of the story of the crossing of the Red Sea. We read something that is similar to what the disciples said that night. They prostrated themselves on the floor of the boat, declared, "You are the Son of God." They had that change, But in Exodus we read, when Israel saw the mighty deeds that Adonai had performed against the Egyptians, the people feared Adonai, and they believed in Adonai and in his servant Moshe. Then they believed. It's not wrong to desire something more. They were being asked not to walk on water, but to go on the desert with no food, no water, and trust this one guy who told them, "Don't worry, God's going to take care of you." They say only 10%, a remnant left. Many Jews remained in Egypt. Many Israelis remained in Egypt. So after all that, then they had faith. Well, if he can do that, might not be too bad to give us food and water in the desert for 3 million people. Child's play. And at the end of the story in Matthew 14, we read, as they went up into the boat, the wind ceased. The man in the boat fell down before him and explained, "You really are God's son." They believed. So I guess let's all learn from Peter and keep our eyes on him. But if we don't, let us know that he'll be there to catch us up when we sink. We have this assurance. That's our hope. That's our faith. Our Father, we pray that you help us navigate the raging mighty waters of life and their seeming chaos. Help us to always try to see your plan in our life through these things. And even if we don't see it, to know that you have a plan for us. You do not leave us orphans. You have a plan for us. You watch us. Amen.